Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party celebrating their extraordinary victory in the European elections last month.
Who won the elections yesterday?
A record number of seats for a party that wants to dismantle the very body it's been elected to, and whose main purpose is to make sure that Britain leaves the EU on the 31st of October. But before Mr Farage can take up his seat at the European Parliament, perhaps only for a couple of months, he'll have to deal with a potentially serious disciplinary matter after being accused of failing to declare financial support of almost £500,000. In a letter to the European Parliament's President, the Advisory Committee for the Conduct of Members says it considers that Mr Farage committed a serious breach of the Code of Conduct, the seriousness of which merit the highest penalty. It also recommends the President refer the matter to the European Anti-Fraud Office for investigation and liaise and cooperate with the UK's National Crime Agency, the Electoral Commission and Metropolitan Police to establish the full facts. The committee has made these recommendations after our investigation conducted while Mr Farage was on the hustings. Remember the rental house in Chelsea? £13,000 a month. The bodyguards, £5,000 a month, and the multiple flights to the US.
What a job he's done.
We discovered that in the year after the 2016 referendum, when Nigel Farage was an MEP and subject to parliamentary rules, he received around £450,000 from Arron Banks' companies to fund him, his lifestyle and his political operations. I confronted Farage about this money at the end of May. You said in 2017 that you were skint, that there was no money in politics, but there clearly was quite a lot of money in it for you, wasn't there? Yes or no? Why do you want to talk about these things? I mean, none of this is illegal, but this is important. You're running for public office. It's a matter of transparency.
It certainly is. We've got a democratic election next Thursday, which is all about democracy, and you won't even talk about it.
You rail against the elite, the metropolitan elite in London.
I rail against people like you. You're
exactly.
Quite right.
And yet you're living the lifestyle of the elite, or you were, financed by very rich friends.
Terrible, isn't it?
No comment on this?
None at all.
Nigel, who's paying for all this now? Is Arron Banks still paying for some of it? Who's paying for all this now, Nigel? Given that the European Parliament's Advisory Committee believes that Mr Farage was in breach, the next step is now up to the man meeting Theresa May, Antonio Tajani, the outgoing President of the Assembly. So what are his options?
I suppose from a financial point of view, the most stringent violation is to remove the daily substance allowance from an MEP for up to 30 days. But also they could be suspended, but still be able to vote and not represent Parliament in any kind of official capacity. What we want is a more robust sanctions regime for codes of conduct and ethical violations of parliamentarians to act as a strict deterrent.
So the sanctions and the deterrence against those MEPs who are in breach of conduct are very limited. But it also appears that the Advisory Committee of the European Parliament feels that for a politician like Nigel Farage, whose whole career has been about a call for greater openness and transparency and accountability and an end to cosy corruption, he is hardly leading by example. Matt Fry, Channel 4 News.
Well, in response to this development, a spokesperson for Nigel Farage has told us that we find it amazing that you should be in possession of this letter before Mr Farage's office in Brussels has received any such information. This demonstrates that Channel 4 are cooperating with an individual who clearly dislikes Nigel Farage, but nevertheless sits on a committee which purports to make judgments about him and who, by leaking this letter, seeks to bounce the President into making a decision before he has seen any evidence. This is unacceptable and a breach of protocol surrounding the operation of this committee.